What's a disturbing fact you know that most people don't? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. The conditions in a throat and a female body part are so similar, strep can be passed from one to the other. Yes, you can get strep female body part. Story 2. Your butthole burns when you have diarrhea because the food waste is traveling through your body so fast that there's still digestive enzymes in the poop, and they are now very slightly digesting your butthole. Story 3. A vulture's stomach acid is 100x stronger than a human's, making it stronger than battery acid. This also makes it acidic enough to even digest bones, which make up roughly 60-90 of their diet. Story 4. When disposing of a body, it's best to do it in water. For obvious reasons, there is the wildlife and the very nature of water being a solvent. The problem with this is, as decomposition happens, gases fill the body, bloating it and causing it to rise and float. Many people make the joke to tie a brick or fill the stomach with cement, but that's work. The easiest method is to wrap the body in chicken wire. Doesn't even have to be barbed. In water, the skin gets so soft that by the time bloating happens, the wire pierces and cuts the skin, releasing the gases and ensuring the body stays in the depths and hidden. Answer. You're always going to have problems lifting a body in one piece. Apparently, the best thing to do is cut up a corpse into 6 pieces and pile it all together. And when you got your 6 pieces, you got to get rid of them, because it's no good leaving it in the deep freeze for your mom to discover. Now is it? Then I hear the best thing to do is feed them to pigs. You got to starve the pigs for a few days, then the side of a chopped up body will look like curry to a piss head. You gotta shave the heads of your victims and pull the teeth out for the sake of the piggy's digestion. You could do this afterwards, of course, but you don't want to go 7 through pig chute, now do you? They will go through bone like butter. You need at least 16 pigs to finish the job in one sitting, so be wary of any man who keeps a pig farm. They will go through a body that weighs 200 pounds in about 8 minutes. That means that a single pig can consume 2 pounds of uncooked flesh every minute, hence the expression, as greedy as a pig. Story 5. Bodies need to be frozen before going in the wood chipper, or it won't work that great and the machinery will gunk up. Story 6. Almost all of the money from Live Aid was diverted to the Ethiopian government and used for weapon purchases, not famine relief. Story 7. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, there was a city, I forget the name, besides Pompeii, the most famous, where at first they couldn't find any bodies, which was weird. Well, eventually they found the population had attempted to take cover in the storage area by the port. These aren't perfect details or descriptions, I'm sorry. Anyway, when they studied the bodies, they basically found that when the pyroclastic flow rolled in, it was so hot it turned the water in their brains to steam instantly, and their brains all exploded inside their heads instantaneously. Story 8. Chainsaws were invented in the 18th century to perform sympasiotomies on women during difficult deliveries to widen the birth canal. It arguably decreased the rate of women dying during childbirth, but it left the mothers crippled. Answer. The forceps were invented when a family of doctors had the bright idea to blunten their craniotomy tongs to try pulling the baby out instead of just cutting its head up into tiny pieces. We've been performing craniotomies on stuck babies for centuries. The choice had often been that or a fatal, for the mother, emergency cesarean, and mothers can live without babies much better than babies can live without mothers. This invention has saved millions of lives. But why the fudge did it take so long for someone to consider pulling the baby out in one piece? Soryani warned that the answers from this will end up on TikTok, Reels, or Shorts, with an AI voice reading them, while the visuals will be Minecraft Parlor. Story 10. There hasn't been a single day in all of recorded history where a war wasn't going on somewhere in the world. Story 11. Cage-free chickens are kept so tightly packed that they can't establish normal social structures and will just peck each other's eyes out. So to solve this, factory farms will simply shave down the chickens' beaks. Answer. Follow-up. Most chickens raised in actual good conditions have interesting and sometimes amazing personalities, akin to dogs or other personable creatures. They're smart, clever, funny animals that have a great capacity for affection and humor. Some of the Frankensteins we've bred are weird, but my point stands. They're dinosaurs, but their capacity for character and emotion is massively underrated. But the conditions in which they're raised and butchered are absolutely horrific. Story 12. Debit resequencing. The common practice of banks arranging the order your debits post to incur the most overdraft fees Not sure whether it's finally illegal or not, but that and the sheer concept of mortgage insurance are what made me begin hating banks while working for one. Answer: love banks. When I'm broke and hungry with 1.39 in my account and try to buy a 2 McDouble so my tummy will stop growling, decline because I have overdraft protection. Okay, fine, I signed up for it. But when I have 1.99 in my account and didn't cancel Spotify, A-1 $12.99, 25 overdraft fee. But I thought I had overdraft protection? I fill with so much rage when they smile and say, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about things set up for autopay. They can. They know they can. They make the rules. They know they will make a lot of money this way. Lastly, the time I tried to cash a BOA check at BOA, they charged me $8 because I don't bank with them. I said, you wrote the check? Is this a joke? Am I actually being punked, Ren? I live in a state where the minimum wage is still $7.25, so I look her in her eyes and said, $8 is more than I make in an hour of work. Hanukkah, it's not her fault, but I don't understand how anyone could work for these people. I dislike banks. Story 13. After certain types of brain surgery, your nurses and doctors will obsess over your bowel movements because straining can lead to intracranial pressure spikes that might cause your brain to turn off. Story 14. The majority of adults have no idea what they're doing for a large portion of the time and are completely winging it. Your parents, your boss, your doctor, your lawyer, every single one of them have several aspects of life at which they completely fail and struggle through. We just get really good at not letting on. Story 15. Pigeons are a domesticated animal that humans abandoned. We used them for deliveries for so long, and when we didn't need them anymore, we tossed them out on the streets. It makes me sad. Story 16. You can be conscious during surgery. It's called anesthesia awareness, and you can feel everything, but be unable to move or speak. Story 17. Insects have 2.5 times the biomass of people. For every kg of human, there is roughly 2.5 kilo of bugs. Just imagine if you ran into a mass of bugs that was 2.5x your own size and weight, just writhing there, taunting you. Every human on Earth has a massive pile of bugs out there, waiting for them. When shoot hits the fan, you best be ready. Story 18. You have a higher chance of being struck by lightning while being attacked by a shark than you do to win the major jackpot of the lottery. Story 19. Some women have orgasms during childbirth, not on purpose necessarily, but it's something that happens. We just don't talk about it, and some women feel ashamed despite it being out of their control. Story 20. It's a disturbing fact, well, at least for me, that CP is way too much common, and pedos too than we normally think it is. Answer. Especially with the rise of adult content addiction, people become desensitized and develop paraphilias, which can include pedophilia. Especially if they start young, it's natural to be attracted to girls your age when you're 10. But if you fudge up your brain at that point, there's a much higher likelihood that you'll continue being attracted to 10 years olds. We seriously need to get adult content addiction under control. Story 21. There's a good chance the shooting star you see in the sky is a feces-filled box burning up in the atmosphere from the International Space Station. Story 22. The furthest you can be from dry land in the middle of the ocean is Point Nemo, or the Pole of Inaccessibility, which is in the southern Pacific Ocean. At this location, you are thousands of miles away from even the closest landmass, which is either Ducie Island or Easter Island clocking, and at a little over 1,600 miles away. If you were to come here by boat and got stuck here, you likely wouldn't be found until long after your passing, as planes and cargo ships rarely ever pass by this location. Fishing equipment would also be useless here as a food source, since it's also located in the South Pacific Gyre, which has a low current level and few nutrients in the water, meaning poor conditions and very low population for marine life. The water around here is also commonly used as a graveyard for defunct spacecraft because removing them from orbit here poses the least amount of risk to both humans and aquatic life, meaning in the off chance you're here, there's also an even rarer chance you get taken out by a falling spacecraft, which is admittedly funny in a black comedy sort of way. Story 23. What a person sounds and looks like when they are bleeding to passing because their aorta ruptured, and there is nothing you can do but give them a big dose of opioids to take the pain away. Answer. I mean, honestly, if I'm dying like that and I chase the dragon for the first time, send it. It sounds like a horrible way to die and a horrible way to watch someone die, but I'm going to put this on a bracelet. Fudge you, am the one dying. Send me out on a rose-colored kaleidoscope trip that eases the pain and makes it all easier. I'm sorry you had to experience that, but thank you, it was me going out with those visuals and feels. Story 24. In 1987, we were less than a week away from releasing a genetically engineered bacterium that would have wiped out all plant life on Earth and thus indirectly wiped out ourselves. A firm in Germany modified a common soil bacterium to digest cellulose and produce ethyl adult beverage, the intent being to turn waste wood chips into something useful. It passed all the standard safety protocols and was slated for production. However, the project had decided to do one last test, one that wasn't required by law, and see what happened if there was an accidental release into the wild by adding the bacterium to live plants growing in soil. In a greenhouse, of course, the plants died, all of them. The bacterium produced enough adult beverage to eliminate the plants, then digested them, producing more adult beverage, until it had sterilized the soil completely. If it had been released, the bacterium, because it was a hardy sort and produced airborne spores when it ran out of food, would have spread from pole to pole, infecting just about anywhere plants could grow. Eliminate everything. Thankfully, safety protocols have been improved since then, but still, what we don't think of might eliminate us. Story 25. You can tear open your ball sack as easily as opening a bag of crisps. So glad I don't have a ball sack all of a sudden. Story 26. Sneezing can eliminate you. If you hold it back or plug your nose while sneezing, the force of it can cause a brain rupture. Story 27. American prisons aren't filled with gay intimacy and love. The media manufactures that to scare young men into obedience of the law. Prisons are some of the most homophobic places on the planet. I went to prison straight, young and vulnerable. I was absolutely fine. Story 28. During the Vietnam War, the American military transported huge amounts of Agent Orange, a potent herbicide, by ship to Vietnam. Had one of those ships sunk or had the contaminants found their way into the ocean, it could have wiped out marine algae, which are responsible for the majority of the Earth's oxygen, and suffocated the planet. Answer. Instead, it wiped out a large portion of Vietnam's rainforests. Almost all the tigers, gave the country the highest rate of birth defects, and those continued, for now at least, 4 generations. I lived there for a while, and I saw some really disturbing-looking people-like-hills-have-eyes type. One guy's face looked like it was melted. One guy was missing a large chunk of his brain. His head was all misshapen, he couldn't walk, and he dragged himself along the street, begging, and I don't think he even fully knew what he was doing. Story 29. If you die in your sleep, there's no sensation, but also no guarantee you'll ever know you died. You simply never wake up. There's no final thought, no awareness of it happening. You just stop. 1 minute you're alive, the next nothing. Story 30. After lab animals are done with their study, they are put in a giant freezer. Eventually this freezer gets full, so when it's time to make room for new animals, the old ones go in an incinerator. Due to being handled by humans, a lot of them can be kind of friendly source. Mom was a lab tech, and my first cat when I was a kid was kicked off of a study for heart issues. I asked if they were all that friendly. Story 31. When your heart stops and you are not getting proper oxygenation, your body will still try to breathe. The mouth will continue to gasp for breath that is no longer coming. This can happen if all other activity in the brain has ceased due to hypoxia. Definitely a terrible thing to behold for the first time. Also, while you are performing CPR, the person receiving CPR can wake up as you are doing chest compressions, called CPR-induced consciousness. I read about it first on Reddit, people being awake enough to talk, to tell you to keep going, or plead with you to stop, even fight and resist CPR. Unless they have a perfusing heart rhythm, if you stop chest compressions, they usually stop moving. Thanks to Reddit, I knew that when my patient I was doing CPR on locked eyes with me and reached for my face with their arms outstretched, I had to keep going. Even the doctor who came into the room asked, "Are they awake?" Unfortunately, they didn't make it. Story 32. Tasmanian devils are going extinct because they have a type of cancer, devil facial tumor disease, or DFTD, that's transmitted by blood contact. Every time a devil that has cancer gets in a fight with and bites a healthy devil, the cancer cells infect the new devil. It's fatal within 6 to 12 months. Story 33. Not sure if this is disturbing, but there are variations on the number of lobes your lungs can have. The normal number is 3 lobes on the right side, 2 on the left, but some people can have 2 lobes on the right, 3 on the left, or even 4 on the right. As long as you have sufficient bronchi and bronchioles, it shouldn't have much impact on your lung function. Story 34. Teeth aren't bones. I'm sure you're all well aware that sharks have teeth, and yet I'm sure many of you also are aware that sharks are cartilaginous fish, meaning they don't actually have bones. That's because sharks broke off from the main fish line before bones had even evolved. But if they don't have bones and teeth are supposedly bones, well, how do they have teeth? The answer is teeth aren't bones. What sharks do have is scales. Teeth are modified fish scales. When we track back in the fossil record, we can follow the transition from scales around the lip to hardened beak to internal teeth. Teeth are specialized fish scales. Story 35. The fancy red-white barber pole outside the shop came to be because at one point the barbers became temporary surgeons and they performed bloodlettings in shop that involved cutting the client patient's hand and having them hold a pole that led into a bucket, hence the red and white pole. Also the term barber surgeon came from. Story 36. With the right plan and the right nukes, you'd only need 6 to completely and permanently alter the fabric of human society. Guess how many of that size nuke went missing all at once during the Cold War? Story 37. China leads the world in forced organ harvesting. No other country in the world do you have to wait less for an organ transplant. It also happens to be the country that donates the least amount of organs per capita. It's well documented they harvest organs from Uyghurs and people who are unjustly imprisoned. Answer: when I was in Seoul, a mate of mine's father-in-law needed a transplant desperately, and the Korean doctors told him to go to China and arrange it. They did, and the surgery was almost instant. Then they sewed him up, and in less than 24 hours, they put them on a plane back to Seoul. Apparently, the transplanted organ was rare, and my mate was really wondering where they got it so quickly. On top of that, you shouldn't be flying within 24 hours of major surgery. They just don't care over there about any human being. The giver, the receiver, it doesn't matter. Story 38. The sperm is responsible for determining the intimacy of the baby. Yet for all of human history, mothers were blamed, beat, tortured, and often eliminated for not producing a son. It was the father that determines it. Even now in 2025, with all the access to information, women are still blamed when the preferred intimacy, almost always a boy, is not born. A few factors may have minimal impact on the chance it could go one way or another, but the sperm is still carrying the chromosomes that determine the intimacy. Story 39. Someone buried 6 FTE under in a pine box will have it collapse upon itself within a week. For this reason, after everyone leaves, Grandma gets one last pounding by a backhoe so they don't have to come in and fill the spot when the collapse happens later on. If a body in this scenario is exhumed, it comes out wafer thin, like some weird corpse casket Kit Kat. TLDR, the zombies that come out of the ground in movies should be 2D if buried at proper depths. Story 40. University students are being defrauded by way of fees and housing. None of these things cost what they should. If you are there for an education, you are probably mainly interested in instructional fees. Great. Ask your university what of your tuition fees goes to instructional costs, or better yet, to your professor's classes. Where I teach, it's only about 4 of the money college students pay to attend. The rest goes to admin, IT, insurers, parking attendants, on-campus police, mandatory healthcare, even if you have private insurance and the like. Ours are all paying into super cool gym equipment that only 5 of campus uses. Administration are, around here, $500K to $2 million. Liability insurance and lawyers are the biggest cost along with IT, who are incompetent here. I believe this is repeated across most universities unless they are private. Story 41. A lot of vegan movements are all offshoots of PETA, which they use to commit crimes up to and including domestic terrorism, breaking and entering, awful animal abuse that they film and release falsely as footage from a farm, destroying ecosystems by freeing hundreds or thousands of farm animals that aren't native to the area. Several years ago, they broke into a cow farm and one of their people died because they got stuck in a machine they shouldn't have been messing with. Story 42. The youngest mother in the world was 5 years old, 7 months and 21 days old. She is still alive today in her early 90s. Story 43. HPV causes not only cervical cancer, but mouth and throat cancers as well. So the HPV vaccine isn't just for cervical cancer, but oral cancers too. You can get genital warts in your throat. Story 44. What a passing rattle is, and more importantly, the sound of it. Wish I didn't. The passing rattle is a rattling, gurgling, or gurgling sound produced by the movement of fluids in the throat and airways when a person is nearing passing. It occurs because the dying person is too weak to clear secretions like saliva and mucus through coughing or swallowing. Story 45. The brain can remain conscious for up to 20 seconds after decapitation, so actually you are aware of being beheaded for just long enough to realize what happened. Story 46. Medical people know this, but I desperately need everyone else to understand muscle tetanus, also known as tetanic contraction, is a sustained muscle contraction that occurs when the frequency of stimulation is so rapid that there is no relaxation period. The muscle stays contracted. Tetanus that you should be getting vaccinated for via TDAP 7 or DTaP under 7 is very literally named. Do not fudge around without the tetanus vaccine. Get it. Story 47. When you asphyxiate, your brain literally explodes. When you freeze to passing your eyelids and nose fall of first, probably your male body part, depending on clothing. Story 48. If you stab someone in the stomach, they scream really loud. But if you jerk the knife upward and cut their diaphragm, they can't scream loud anymore. Story 49. The government is horrible, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. The average person knows so little about the sophisticated manipulation techniques used by the government that they're effectively useless as a potential threat. Even if we took up arms, unless enough people really understood what they were up against, they'd be easily torn apart from the inside. Edit, the government using propaganda to direct people's attention toward corporations and the rich is the tip of the iceberg. Story 50. There is this branch of math called group theory. You could say it's the study of symmetry operations, i.e., actions that preserve something. If you turn a square by 90, it's still a square. You change the location of every point, but you preserve the shape. A big task in the field was classifying all the types of symmetry there are, no matter how abstract. There are infinitely many of them, but through monumental collective effort, all of them have been classified into a total of 18 categories. Well, all of them except exactly 26 exceptions that don't fit anywhere. What makes this go from unsatisfying to genuinely kind of unsettling is that one of these anomalies was later found hiding in plain sight in another completely unrelated branch of math. Even the people who found it have no idea why it exists. One guy who helped discover it describes it as the voice of God. Story 51. Reality exists only in my head, and when I sleep, it is no longer there. When I die, it will be gone forever. Story 52. The IDF has a sperm retrieval unit where they extract the sperm from dead soldiers, with or without their consent, to give to their families. Story 53. In the 90s in Italy, if I remember correctly, a boy and his cousin decided they wanted to steal the life insurance of one of them. The plan was simple. One would cut the other's leg with a chainsaw, making it look like an accident. Too bad they didn't call the ambulance before doing so, and the guy with the amputated leg bled to passing, the other condemned. Story 54. The human rectum can stretch up to 8 inches. A raccoon can fit into a 4-inch hole. Therefore, the human rectum can theoretically fit 2 raccoons in there. Story 55. The entry wound in the reed of President Kennedy's skull was measured by Dr. Pierre Fink, the only ballistics expert ever to examine JFK's physical remains, as being smaller than the caliber of bullet Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to have fired. Story 56. When Saddam Hussein seized power over the Ba'ath Party in 1979, he had a man tortured until he confessed to working with other party members to plot against Hussein. He called out their names one by one. As he did, they were led away by armed guards. This proceeded until 21 officials were gone. Then Saddam Hussein led the remaining officials outside, gave them guns, and ordered them to eliminate their comrades. Story 57. Your smartphone knows you better than your partner. Algorithms can guess your interests, political views, and even mental disorders with up to 90 accuracy. Story 58. People like to put OSHA certified, whatever, on resumes, but OSHA doesn't give out personal equipment certifications to individuals. Edit. Yeah, I know my reply is boring. Story 59. The entire story of thalidomide, and if it wasn't for one brave woman in the United States, it would have been put out for general release there. Given the state of things there now, I don't think they would be so fortunate. Story 60. A fair portion of modern medicine, psychology, psychiatry, and the resulting ethics to each were developed formalized because of German scientists approximately 100 years ago. Bonus, they had strong influence on physics and chemistry too. Story 61. Around 1 in 10 car drivers has admitted to at some point, or still ongoing, playing video games on their phone while driving. So you know there's more people that do this, but don't admit. Keep your eyes on the goddamn road. Story 62. Global warming. Right now, no one is paying much attention to this issue, and no one is doing anything about it. In a few years, drought will be the biggest challenge for humanity. Story 63. Allegedly, home inspectors have business relationships with the trades that will fix what they find wrong. Story 64. Bonobos, which are just as closely related to us as chimps, are basically the hentai monkey. intimacy is like shaking hands to them. Something like 90% of them are bi, and the males will have intimacy even with newborns. Story 65. The chlorine smell in pools isn't actually chlorine, but chloramine. It's a compound that forms when chlorine is mixed nitro-containing contaminants like urine and sweat. A pool that is properly maintained will have little to no smell. Story 66. The chainsaw was invented in the late 1700s for aiding in medical procedures, specifically childbirth. Story 67. Almost all the dates you consume in the West in places where they aren't naturally grown have insects in them. Story 68. The exi-util's back door. About a year ago, the entire world was so very close to having an absolutely insane amount of Linux servers compromised. It was only found and prevented because a developer noticed a slightly different behavior in SSH connections. Establishing a connection suddenly took 500 kilometers longer than usual. Story 69. There's an acceptable amount of mouse poop and cockroach carcasses allowed in canned and prepackaged food, according to the FDA. Enjoy. Story 70. Armadillos carry leprosy. However, it's pretty unlikely that a human could catch leprosy from an armadillo. Story 71. The radiation from a nuclear weapon has a special way of melting the top layer of skin from a person's body. It can peel and fall away like snakeskin or candle wax, revealing raw flesh. In 1945, citizens of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were regularly observed walking around with the skin of their legs trailing behind them, attached at the ankles, among many other horrors. Story 72. Banana-flavored candy doesn't taste like banana because it is based on a species of banana that is extinct. Story 73. The male body part is not edible. It's pure muscle, so it is too chewy. I was watching a true crime story about a cannibal serial killer. That's the serial killer's words, not mine. Story 74. When you die, in order to keep your eyes closed during a funeral, they use something called eye spikes. They are literal spikes attached to a contact lens-like mechanism that pierces the skin of the eyelid to keep it closed. Story 75. Every mother who was pregnant gave birth is a chimera, as baby cells will travel into the woman's body and they stay there forever. You can detect those cells in brain and heart tissues and other spots of the body. Story 76. Keep your pets up to date on rabies vaccination. If your pet is not current and is euthanized after showing signs of neurological damage, the vet may have to send your pet's head out to be tested for rabies. Rabies in humans in the United States is very rare and mostly from bat bites contracted within the country or other mammal bites that happened outside the country. Having a bat in your house while you are asleep or otherwise incapacitated, or if there is a young child who might not be able to report a bite, is sufficient to warrant rabies vaccination. The vaccine is now given in the arm, not the abdomen. There was one cluster of cases that occurred because an organ donor was infected. Story 77. The one cause of passing for pregnant women in the U.S. is homicide. The one cause of passing for postpartum women in the U.S. is homicide. Story 78. There are some species of spider where the female devours the male after intimacy. This is a very old evolutionary adaptation going back millions of years. It was once believed it was, so the female spider had enough sustenance to support her through the pregnancy. Turns out this isn't why the trait exists. The male actually continues to ejaculate while being devoured, therefore increasing his chances of impregnating the female and continuing his line, as if spiders were not terrifying enough. Story 79. Most people think that depression only comes from trauma and bad experiences. But the truth is that even daily routines, repeating the same actions every day, or taking a rest day by not getting out of bed, can lead to severe depression. Edit by routine. I meant the one that cycles around specific things with no changes. Wake up, go to work, do chores, go home, sleep, which most people's lives, and by a rest day in bed, I'm talking about how it is for people who do it for once, then start to do it more often. It starts to be their new routine, which develops to have a lack of movement or stimulation leading to depression. Answer: depression is chemical imbalance. I've had depression since I was about 10. My days were varied and full of adventures, yet I became depressed. Depression is not caused by staying in bed one day or by having a routine that is too predictable. Routines actually can help set achievable and straightforward goals for people dealing with the executive dysfunction that often accompanies depression. This comment reads like a corporation trying to work their employees to the bone by discouraging rest. Keep going. If you stop even for a moment, the evil depression monster will catch you. Story 80. I actually know so fudge many, but I'm drawing pretty much a blank right now. Pigs are omnivores and eat meat. They can eliminate smaller animals to consume them. Don't keep chickens and hens within reach of pigs. Pigs can just pick up chickens and chew them down. Giving birth always, or almost always, involves pooping due to the pushing. For those who plan to have children or are pregnant right now, nurses and doctors are used to it. Don't worry, they don't think it's disgusting or odd. They pretty much always try to hide that it has happened to ensure you don't feel embarrassed and distressed about it. You can be completely symptom-free from a painful, problematic medical condition until you become informed that you have it. There's studies on it with patients with conditions like spinal disc herniation. Women often get sent to psychologists instead of having their symptoms being taken seriously, leading to years-long delays when compared to men in diagnosis of serious conditions like cardiac conditions. Women also, more often than men, don't get informed about WAYS procedures to try and preserve their fertility during cancer treatments. Women often get taken more serious if they have a man accompany them to medical appointments. So if you have a mother, sister, friend, girlfriend, or wife who gets brushed off by medical professionals, do try and go with her on as many appointments as possible. I'll add more when I remember them. I know way more disturbing facts than the above LLO. Story 81. Guilty feet have got no rhythm and most Americans voted for a fascist twice. Edit. America elected the same fascist as president twice. We're on the same team. This was mostly a joke. Ease up. This is why we don't win elections. Story 82. Asbestos, lead, and radon. Mold isn't scary at all, but people are scared to passing. The other things get so little attention and can really cause harm. Story 83. Social media managers regularly make spelling grammar mistakes in their posts in order to bait engagement and through that generate reach. Y'all are just too predictable, being like, actually, the spelling is. Story 84. That us Kiwis do foo sheep. Load them up and then export them to Australia to be served up in only the finest dinning restaurants and establishments. Bon appetit. Story 85. Most of the patients in the ICU are basically dead people getting their estates drained until someone decides to unplug them. They can keep grandma alive for an extra week, but she isn't getting any better and it's going to cost you $1 million. Story 86. Jerk pearls. Yes, like human pearls forming in your gut when you get a colostomy bag for extended periods of time. Story 87. There are scientific findings that imply the brain to be conscious during anesthesia. It could be that just memory retention isn't working. Story 88. There's people doing animal torture videos for fun right now somewhere. I don't know if I can post links here, but please Google Save China Cats petition and sign and share the petition to help investigate and arrest these people. Story 89. Everything is based on perception. Everything, including the flow of time itself. If you are there to perceive something, it's there. If you're dead, time no longer exists to you, nor does anything else. Story 90. Straining too hard when you poop can cause rectal prolapse, ECA. You push out your rectum, so don't strain. Story 91. At the end of Wubbywood, all of the inmates of the concentration camps were freed, except the homosexuals who were not recognized as having been persecuted and were sent to prison. Story 92. Your brain can remain conscious for up to 20 seconds after you're decapitated. That's enough time to realize what happened. Story 93. Cats don't have periods like humans and dogs. They release an egg when penetrated. Second cat fun intimacy fact, the male body part is jagged, so the female experiences pain if they try and get away before the male is done. Story 94. I saw a deer sniffing a bird. It was like a Disney movie until the deer started eating the bird. Apparently, when deer need more calcium in their diet, they will eat birds or rodents. Herbivores? Bullshit. Story 95. If doctors take a sample of your spinal fluid when your intracranial pressure is too high, checking for meningococcal meningitis, for example, it can suck your brain down into your spine. This is called conning. Story 96. At least 3 to 4 people a college football season are run over by the sideline camera on the platform moving on wheels. Normally a cheerleader, signed, guy who was run over on the sideline and had a lawyer do some digging. Story 97. The first display of takedown ever recorded happened in over 400,000 years ago, where the victim died due to a huge blunt at their head as 2 holes were ingrained inside the skull. Motive for takedown is most likely fighting for resources. Story 98. Bat scientists in Minnesota have no clue where the bats go in the wintertime. They have tried tracking them for years, and it's like they just disappear. Story 99. For a time, it was believed that babies couldn't feel pain, so they would undergo surgery without anesthesia. Story 100. When you bury a body, bury some animal on top of it like 2 meters. So when dogs smell something, cops will only find an animal. Story Story 101. If a cat has kittens and one of them is stillborn, she will eat it. The entire stillborn kitten. Seen this happen twice. The first time I freaked out all the way. Story 102. I was doing promotions for a national coffee company when they were rolling out flavor shots. We were trying to determine what was the best way to add them to the hot coffee. We assumed that adding the very small amount of flavor first, then adding the coffee to mix it, would be the best way, rather than adding a tiny amount of shot to the top of the full cup. We quickly realized that we can't add the flavor first, because if we do, the concentrate will dissolve the styrofoam cup, and little chunks of styrofoam will start floating to the top of the cup, and the cup begins leaking. That was about 15 years ago, so maybe it's not the same now, but there is still a chance that the flavor is something that can dissolve styrofoam. Story 103. A sizable amount of pigs in butcheries have tapeworms, Ascaris suum specifically. I forgot the percentage, but my uni used to have the dissection of Ascaris suum on the curriculum, and they would typically get them by the buckets at butcheries. Bonus fact, there are parasitic and non-parasitic flatworms. The non-parasitic ones have most of their internal real estate taken up by their digestive tract, because food isn't that easy to come by when you're just floating about in a river or whatever. Parasitic flatworms have all the nutrients they could wish for in another animal's intestines, so they are just chock full of reproductive organs. It's all just eggs in there. It's horrific. Story 104. After the Challenger exploded, at least 2 of the crew were still alive as they plummeted towards Earth. This was determined by the record of when the PEP, Personal Emergency Air Packs, were activated. Story 105. If you report that you've been intimacy assaulted, police will seize your phone. They will then comb through your phone and use anything they can in there against you. Take your own private pictures, asking for it. Watch adult content, asking for it. Sex with your spouse partner, asking for it, etc., 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 etc. They will also show other officers, detectives what they find, and they will laugh at and judge you. This also applies to DOAs. If you're found dead in your home, even if it's almost certainly medical, they go through everything and they will talk to each other about what they find. Sincerely, a civilian who works among detectives and has seen and heard all of the above. Disclaimer, this applies to my specific PD, and yours might be different, might be better. Story 106. The U.S. led invasion of Korea eliminate between 12 to 20% of the North Korean population, or 1.2 million to 2 million people. Story 107. Slavery is still alive and well in America. In fact, it's a constitutional right. 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Story 108. The world has already ended. We're living in a post-apocalyptic world as we speak. The mans were right. The world did end in 2012. As we speak, we are all slaves in every sense of the word. Our future has been bought and paid for by billionaires. We exist to be slaves at this point in time. Until the day we expire, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Answer. Nah, we are all dead in hell and Satan is playing a joke. Everything looks the same, but he's slowly changing things to see how long before we notice. Satan. They still haven't figured it out. Demon. How about you make Trump president? Satan. Har, har, har. That's a good one. Demon. They think it's still real? Satan. Made man in his image. These are the dumbest motherfuckers. Story 109. If you die and your cat is there with your body, they will eventually eat bits of you, usually starting with your lips and nose. Gross. My dog would never. Story 110. Autonomous cars are in fact expensive trains nobody needs and will doom civilization. They're being sold to old politicians as the natural progression of a solution from electric cars, which are themselves a natural progression from the shoot cars currently destroying the environment. 50% of the pollution of the lifetime of any car is in its manufacturing and delivery. A substantial proportion of autonomous and electric cars still run on fossil fuels from a centralized power plant somewhere, think coal, and will continue to do so for decades. Lastly, consider that autonomous and electric cars are still 4 tons of material that has to be pushed by energy. The fact is that 80 of people use cars to commute to and from work, which is 80 of the time approx, 20 miles away. And most of that time they're operated in single occupancy mode, further imbalancing the inefficiency inherent in our car future. And because of planned obsolescence, this bullshit continues to be built to have a lifetime of only about 10 to 15 years. By the time we replace all of these legacy cars with all of these newer, also inefficient cars, and everyone's made $1, and we realized our mistake, we will be living on a dead planet. Because it's not culturally popular to switch to actual effective train and bicycle infrastructure now, and it will be too late then. Story 111. BMI is utter bollocks. It was invented by a Belgian in the 19th century to establish the average body mass of other Belgians. He didn't include anyone non-white, non-Belgian, or women. So essentially, if you're measuring your body on a BMI scale, you're comparing your mass to a white 19th century Belgian man. Story 112. That in any custody dispute between parents, there is a 70 chance that DV occurred in that relationship. Saying that, and given that, in any custody dispute between mother and father, unless father has a documented criminal record or he's homeless, he will gain custody of the kids 75% of the time. Often sole custody. Moral: the family courts disregard domestic abuse when determining where the children live. But they will rob a mother of custody rights for something very small or even an unfounded allegation made by the father. Story 113. That 68% of Israelis don't care if all of Gazans were eliminated due to the lack of food medicine. Story 114. Your phone is always, almost every sum sends your location and other information to the base station. Only in flight mode it does not send. Story 115. I've seen someone's head being blown off. It is not what you expect. It's not clean off. It's messy and absolutely horrible. Story 116. Poop is acidic, and because it is acidic, if you get it on your skin and leave it there without cleaning it off, for whatever reason, you get skin burns. Story 117. From working in hotel maintenance, every type of hotel door lock, yes, every type, can be opened with either common objects, makeshift tools, or basic tech programming knowledge. For example, the U-bolt style latch can be easily opened from the outside with a rubber band and a thumbtack. The only scenario that this doesn't work is if the intruder has massive hands. Normal adult male hands are small enough to fit the fingers as far inside the door crack as necessary to unlock it. Story 118. About a third of people with epilepsy don't respond to meds. There's this thing called SUDEP2, which is sudden unexplained passing in epilepsy, where a person goes to sleep and just dies. Answer: I have substances-resistant epilepsy and have notified my parents of the risks of SUDEP. There's a 1 in 1,000 chance it could take me every year, so there's a good chance they'll outlive me, comparatively, of course. I also live alone, which makes them worry more. I wish I could reassure them and fix the problem, because they already lost one of their kids about 20 years ago. But I can't, because there's no cure in sight. Story 119. There were over 55 million people worldwide living with dementia in 2020. This number will almost double every 20 years, reaching 78 million in 2030 and 139 million in 2050. Much of the increase will be in developing countries. Already 60% of people with dementia live in low and middle-income countries, but by 2050, this will rise to 71%. Edit: it also doesn't have an effective treatment, and I changed the wording of the Alzheimer's Association's projections to reflect that 2020 is in the past. Answer: and as someone whose work memory cares, it's not looking pretty. We're always at max capacity. Long wait lists. It's so fudge expensive. And even then, the conditions are just sad. Even with proper training of staff, they're so understaffed. People are falling and getting injured all the time, eating their own feces, getting violent. Families would be appalled if they spend a full day at one. It's terrible that the mind goes, but the body seems to trudge along for many years. Ours opened in 2017, and we still have an original member there. He's still kicking along, but cognitively worse and worse. It's almost impossible for families to care for them alone, unless you don't work and can provide 247 supervision. It's a sad reality. And at some point, I think society is just not going to care for these people, and the norm is going to let them die. Story 120. Florida's coral reef tract, the third largest in the world, has experienced 99.5 coral cover loss since 1970, 30 of which since 2008. I have witnessed fields of coral covered with fish, reduced to lifeless fields of rubble. Story 121. The man who directed the violation of Nanjing, the brutal takedown and tortures of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, Prince Yasuhiko Asaka, never saw justice. He grew old playing golf and died of natural causes at 93. Answer: I can usually read about pretty gruesome cases about crime takedown torture without it upsetting me, but this, I had a professor warn my class about it before suggesting we don't Google it. I Googled it, read one instance of what specifically happened to a man who was tortured, and then never interacted with content about this particular case ever again. It's its own realm of brutality, like it's not solely violation and takedown. It's things you never could have imagined were even possible to do to someone. I hope that guy is rotting in hell. Story 122. The disappearance of Geraldine Largay haunts me. She was hiking on the Appalachian Trail and became lost when she left the trail to relieve herself. While lost, she used her survival skills to survive for nearly a month, but eventually succumbed to starvation and exposure. When her body was found 2 years after her passing, there was a note there reading, "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now." During the time she was lost, she tried multiple times to call for help using her phone, but there was no signal. She saw multiple search planes and helicopters, but they could not see her through the thick trees. She tried to set fires to nearby trees to let them know she was there, but couldn't manage it. Towards the end of her life, she thought about trying to climb up onto a hill above the canopy, but by then she was just too weak from starvation to do so. She died in her sleeping bag after 26 days of holding on for as long as she could, hoping help would come, but it never did. We know all of this because she wrote it down in a journal she had with her, and before she died, she wrote a note to her husband saying, "George, please read XOXO on it." Perhaps the most gut-wrenching fact of all is that Geraldine was found only about 2 miles off the trail, heartbreakingly close to salvation the entire time. Story 123. We abandoned the pigeons. We spent centuries domesticating them, being friendly to them, and as a result, they moved to our cities and relied on us. Then we decided they were pests. Story 124. The amount of tumors found in the average autopsy of elderly people is insane. How easily you can die for little to no reason. Story 125. Ex-wedding photographer here. A lot of people are wildly disappointed with their wedding day, like so much so they lash out at wedding vendors. One of the main reasons people quit working in the wedding industry is due to ongoing abuse from their clients. You can do one tiny thing less than perfect, and they can turn on you. I've even seen 2 different photographers move cities entirely just to escape past clients. In the industry, we call it the wedding hangover, and it usually hits 2 weeks after. Answer: there's such a huge over-expectation in the US at least for your wedding day to be this perfect, ideal day where it's normal to spend $100K so that everything is beautiful and perfect. Of course, it's never going to be perfect. Of course, everything isn't going to go right. It's absolutely inevitable that people will be disappointed. The wedding industry itself has partly created the problem. Story 126. I think someone said this in another thread the other day, but it sat with me. You don't recognize your lasts. The last time you ever hung out with your school friends, the last time you spoke to your grandfather, the last time you hugged your pet, etc. Point is, we never know when we are in a moment that this could be the last time you ever do this. Unless going through some kind of life change, you just don't realize this moment is special, and because of that, you most likely won't remember it. Answer: that is why it is important to always tell people that they mean a lot to you, that you are proud of them, that you love them. I was 22 when my mom died suddenly. It crushed me. I won't lie. I was alone in the world then. I see how fragile it all is. I give people grace. I always tell them how I feel. I express my love for them, and no one walks away questioning if they messed up so bad they lost my love. My adult kids were picking on me this weekend because I tell them, and the world I think I have the brightest, smartest, best children, even if they are adults. But if I died today, they would know their mother loved them unconditionally and without end, that there was never one doubt in their mind I was their biggest supporter. They can pick on me all they want. I will keep being their encourager, and everyone else around me as well. Story 127. As people age, they often experience loss of friends, family members, and social connections. In many cases, elderly individuals may find themselves living alone with limited mobility and facing health challenges that further isolate them from the outside world. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness among the elderly can have serious negative effects on physical and mental health, leading to depression, anxiety, and even increased mortality rates. Despite their wealth of life experience, wisdom, and often a desire for companionship, many older adults struggle with profound feelings of loneliness, which can go unnoticed by society at large? Answer: this is why I took a job that allowed me to have breakfast with my grandfather before work. My dad said he turned into a different person on their daily phone calls after I started. We got into a good routine of me coming over, telling him to sit down while I cooked and cleaned up. Then we'd sit outside and smoke until it was time for me to go to work. Unfortunately, he found out he had cancer 2 days after his 85th birthday. He had been complaining of shoulder pain and waited until my day off to drive himself to the hospital. He died a month later in his home. We only had 3 months of breakfast together, but I'm so glad I did that. I gave him something to look forward to every day. Story 128. Very few people in your life would actually drop what they were doing to help you. Cherish the ones that would. Shit, sir, this is something that sparked a huge fight with my ex. Buddy of mine called me after he just finished his shift. This guy has been my best friend and more in my life than anyone in my family. He got stuck at work, his car was dead, and it's snowing like a MFer. Despite it being on EM and all the snow, I didn't think twice. She got on my case about it. Why risk it? It's not worth it. Etc. Told her that this is the kind of friend that if he needs something, I don't ask questions and make excuses. Proceeded to tell me saying shoot like that is lip service to make people feel better. Story 129. If you watch footage of the 9/11 aftermath, you'll hear a ringing sound in the background. It's not actually ringing, it's a chirping device on first responders that were buried in the debris. Usually the device doesn't make a constant noise, but there were so many people buried that it created an unbroken wail coming from under the rubble. Also, in the weeks and months following 9/11, there were a lot of cars covered in dust on the streets surrounding what used to be the Twin Towers. These were victims of the attack who were never able to return. Answer: I watched a documentary that showed part of the footage obtained by the French film crew that was riding along with one of the first stations to respond. They were in the lobby of one of the towers trying to set up and ordering different companies up the stairs. Periodically, there was a loud boom, and then a bit later, boom, coming from outside. It sounded like a cannon going off. It was actually bodies falling from the upper floors. The first firefighter to die was actually an elderly chaplain who had been hit by a body as it plummeted to the ground. Story 130. When I was 12 years old, I unchained my dog from the yard where my abusive parents kept him locked up, walked him into some nearby vacant lot, and let him go because I thought at least one of us should be able to get out. Never saw my dog again. Story 131. Enslavement ended gradually in the state of New York from 1799 to 1848, freeing enslaved families one generation at a time over 3 generations. Parents were freed while their children remained enslaved for up to 28 years. I can't imagine being one of those parents. Story 132. If you're a parent, you'll either never live to see your child live their full life, or you will. Both are pretty heartbreaking to think about. Answer: this instantly made me sick to my stomach. I think about this here and there, but it really hits me the hardest on milestone occasions. It cuts me to my core, knowing there's going to come a day when I'll never see or be there for my kids again. I can imagine not being there for them in the good times to enjoy and make memories with them, and the bad ones to support and comfort them when they need it the most. I can imagine missing any milestone in their lives, or my kids being sad or upset and not being able to fully enjoy these milestones BC of my absence. The worst part is that it's out of my control, and there's absolutely nothing I can do to avoid it or stop it from happening. Story 133. The talented young voice actress behind Ducky from The Land Before Time and Anne-Marie from All Dogs Go to Heaven was eliminated by her father at age 10. Ducky's memorable "Yep, quote has made me sad to think of ever since learning this. Story 134. It took my dog a couple years to realize he was here to stay. I was his 7th owner. I am his last. He was returned to the shelter multiple times for behavioral issues, and when he acted out, he would immediately get depressed, thinking he was going back. Very good dog, very happy now, and has turned into quite an entitled princess. Answer: I had a dog from the shelter once that when I first got him, he seemed okay. But when I got him, he didn't leave my side. One time I stopped for gas and he was looking at me out the window. I started walking into the gas station to pay and get a coffee, and he just started screeching in the car, like the most scared I ever seen a dog. I realized he had severe separation anxiety. I went back and picked him up and took him into the shop with me and held him the whole time. I think he realized then I was going to take care of him. I let him sleep on the bed with me at night and accommodate him as much as I could. Leaving him to go to work was rough, but eventually he got over it and then got over it entirely. Near the end of his life, I'd just be like, okay, time to go to work, and he'd go get in his crate and bury himself in a blanket and was fine with it. Story 135. Among dog breeds, beagles are particularly friendly, sweet, and forgiving. That's why they're one of the most common breeds used for animal testing. Answer, I can confirm. Our beagle is the sweetest. He will even let our son's toy dog take treats right out of his mouth. I've never seen a dog be so non-possessive of food. We adopted our beagle from a medical lab when he was about 2. He didn't have a name, had never walked in grass, or really ever been outside. It took him a while to start responding to us talking to him. He had not learned to listen to what people were saying. One thing he did learn very quickly was the wonders of a couch. It quickly became his favorite place to be. One very odd thing, he has never barked. He sometimes makes yippy sounds in his sleep and has howled a couple of times when lonely. But he doesn't bark at all. His cellmate was adopted by friends of ours. He barks all the time. Story 136. Your loved one didn't say any last words. Edit. For context, I worked in a nursing home. People always ask, did they say anything? And the truth is, no. We obviously don't say that to the family, but passing is not like in the movies. Also, a weird thing that happens sometimes is that 24 before passing, they get a sudden spike of energy, which may look like they're getting better, so it confuses the family members sometimes. Also, 80 die alone. Working with old people broke me a little bit. Answer, my mom called and said my dad refused to eat and she thought he was going to die soon. It was late at night and no way for me to get down to them. They live 350 miles away, so I got the early train down the next day. Got there and my dad was better than he had been in ages, wanted me to cook him pasta carbonara for dinner. So I went to the store and got the real good pork cheek and all the other stuff. Got back, prepared everything, and was watching TV with both my parents while waiting for dinner time to roll around. Dad asked me how everything was going, listened to the reply, and then said, I think I'll shut up now. A minute later, I realized he was breathing funny. He died in my arms as Mom called 911. The worst part was doing heart massage for 5 minutes while we waited for the ambulance. He was clearly gone, and he would have been so upset if I'd brought him back. But you can't not. Story 137. Pangolins are believed to be the most illegally trafficked animal in the world. Their scales are sold on the black market for Asian traditional medicine. Answer, there needs to be an international effort to discredit ludicrous examples of traditional medicine. Do you know what pangolin scales are made of? Keratin. Do you know what rhino horns are made of? Keratin. Do you know what your fingernails are made out of? Keratin. Ludicrous beliefs with no basis in scientific fact are eliminate endangered animals so someone can drink ground-up fingernails. Story 138. Scientists think that only something like 0.1% of all species that ever existed happen to be lucky enough to find themselves in the perfect conditions to fossilize for us to find. The vast majority of critters lived out their whole existence and either evolved to a new form or died out without leaving any trace for us to find whatsoever. Without a time machine, we can never know they existed, and if you could go back in time far enough, the majority of what we saw would be to some extent more or less a mystery. Edit to add, and we're not only talking about super ancient animals, squishy things that don't fossilize, or tiny microorganisms, but relatively recent megafauna too. For instance, within our DNA, we have found evidence of a ghost population of a mystery species of our hominin cousins, with whom we, Homo sapiens, interbred. We have no other tangible fossil evidence for them. They weren't Neanderthals or Denisovans. We have no idea who these people were, and wouldn't even have any idea they existed at all if we relied on the fossil record alone. They were an entire species of people that we lived with and knew intimately, just up and gone without a physical trace. What other creatures might have been that we cannot begin to imagine? Story 139. Japanese occupation of Indonesia in WWW2. I almost never see Indonesia mentioned, but they had the 5th highest passing toll during the war. Approximately 4 million people were eliminated, 99 of them civilians. Millions more were tortured, violation, and enslaved. Allies largely avoided the islands in the Pacific campaign, so it was mostly just sickening brutality for its own sake. Story 140. 90 of nursing homes are absolutely horrific. I'm an EMT and have been in and out of many of these facilities. Some few are high quality, clean places with staff that really cares. The vast majority reek of human feces, have employees who don't care about the residents at all, and serve them barely edible mush for food. The worst one I ever saw neglected to put a patient on their prescribed oxygen. Nearly eliminate them actually might have never found out that turned out, but when I left them at the hospital, they were circling the drain. Story 141. That on the MH17 flight that was detonated by a missile, only some of the people on board were deceased immediately on impact. Some of them would have survived for a few minutes, hopefully losing consciousness due to the air pressure, but we don't know for certain how long that would have taken. This weighs on my mind because I have no idea where my coworker friend was sitting in relation to where the missile hit. I just know it took days for her to be found. How to answer, I woke up very early in the morning. I'm in Australia, and remember looking at the news online. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Actual photos of the poor passengers' bodies. It wasn't censored at all. Those poor people. I'll never get the images out of my head. I really hope it was quick for them. I can't recall the news outlet, but shame on them for not censoring the pictures. Story 142. When a man hangs himself, he will often get a passing boner. When their loved ones find their body, this will be one of their last memories of their loved one, alongside desperate scratches on the neck and on nearby walls. Don't do it. Story 143. The recovery rate for eating disorders and how emotionally damaging and ineffective eating disorder treatment often is. Answer. I still hold so much rage for my dad yelling at me for the money I partied too hard by purging instead of getting me help. Was one of the things that showed me he wasn't capable of putting his kids first in any situation. Years later, my stomach bleeds if I don't eat for too long. A single work shift can do it. Can't shoot without magnesium and nicotine. Have zero appetite, and honestly mostly stick to softer, bland foods. BC, they don't make me gag. I also had H. pylori too for a good while. There was a point where I was 84 lbs. My parents didn't even believe me when I finally realized I couldn't stop the cycle, and my binging and purging essentially controlled me and asked for help. My psychiatrist told me, BC, I still have my period, I must be fine. I still don't know how I pulled myself out of it. I was hospitalized for other mental health reasons. And obviously I couldn't do that there or I'd never be let out. And when I left, I just ate very slow, small bites of everything. I also worked on my body image with naked yoga in front of a mirror. It was not easy at first, but I got used to it and it got easier. Kind of mentally mapping what I look like, focusing more on the macros and vitamin content than the calories. Some habits took years to break though. I never got as bad as many I've seen suffer though. But when I was in the weeds of it, it consumed my whole life. Everything I thought of was food and my weight, how I looked. It was horribly addicting and obsessive, and I stand by that. I've relapsed a few times, and luckily I just disliked the experience, felt ashamed, and felt no urge to repeat it. Story 144, that the symptoms of a heart attack, squeezing or tight chest pain from the left arm, etc., are really the symptoms of a heart attack in men. Women may not get any warning or just feel a sharp pain. Story 145. The American home has more clutter than anywhere on Earth. U.S. children, representing just 3% of the global population, account for 40% of the world's toy purchases. Some estimate the number of items in the average home to range between 60 and 300. Zero distinct items. Home clutter and possession of excessive items contributes negatively to mental health. I spend most of my time at home and started looking into all this out of curiosity. Wound up severely emptying my home and only keeping items I actively use. It was a lot of crap to give away or toss, but it did indeed make a great impact mentally and practically. The ease of cleaning and organizing and the emptiness itself are pleasing. Plus, my remaining possessions have real value and stand out. Story 146. About 100 billion humans have ever lived. Of those 100 billion, only about 100 people are considered significant enough to be remembered after passing. For the vast majority of people, you will be completely forgotten within 50,100 years. And with it all the joys and sorrows of your life, your thoughts and dream, your hopes and worries, all of it completely forgotten as if it never existed in the first place. Answer. Of those 100, think of how many of them are remembered for being assholes. On the other hand, if you raise a kid and do your best to help them turn out to be a good person, and they do the same, or you just do your best to be kind to people around you, you might not be personally remembered in 100 years, but you leave ripples that might push humanity a little toward being a little better. I'd be satisfied with that. Story 147. The sad reality that many elderly people in nursing homes often feel lonely and abandoned, facing isolation despite being surrounded by others. Story 148. Grave of the Fireflies, the movie? Yeah, if you've seen it, you know how it ends. If you haven't, check the spoiler. Essentially, it's the story of a young boy and his little sister in the aftermath of World War II in Japan. In the movie, the young boy dies after his little sister dies, both from malnutrition and being ignored by everyone around them. The actual story is much, much more heartbreaking. The original author, who had an incredible amount of guilt, actually survived by hiding food from his sister and hoarding it for himself. He wrote the book that became the movie out of that guilt and felt that she may have survived if he didn't hoard the food. And even if she didn't, he felt he should have died as well. Story 149. One of major killers in either World War I or II, I can't remember which, was barbed wire. Not guns or men, just barbed wire, because men would get caught in it and die, or get cut up, which would lead to lethal infections. Story 150. Autistic people live on average 54 years, 58 years if they don't have developmental delay, 39 years if they do, and 54 years on average. They are something like 9 times as likely to commit tragic end as non-autistic people, but they also die from accidents, lack of access to care due to lack of connectedness or poverty, lack of someone to notice they aren't well, lack of people to help with anything at all, etc. Answer. One thing to consider here is that this is the average age, not the median. It is heavily skewed because autistic kids dying young is sadly common. I'm not sure what study your number comes from, so I can't comment specifically, but there is another study that gives an average age at passing of around 36 years old. However, nearly 80 of those deaths were drowning, asphyxiation, or suffocation in kids younger than 15 years. Having an autistic child of my own, I can see why that is. Before he was 5, I had to Heimlich him twice, and once he bolted off with no notice and jumped in a pool without a second thought, long before he had even an inkling of how to swim. Story 151. The Olympics is the excuse for massive amounts of government corruption. Ever notice how every Olympic stadium is built new rather than using existing structures? Ever notice how they always go over budget, often by double or sometimes even triple? Ever notice how they all seem to be famously low quality, despite this? And yet, every year, who gets to build this crappy facility at enormous taxpayer expense is hotly contested. It's because an Olympic facility is the perfect opportunity for civil servants to do or repay favors for local businesses and their cronies. You want to get in good with the deputy mayor? His brother owns a paving company, and you're in charge of getting the Olympic Village paved. Why not give him a ring? We're going to need a lot of rebar. Why not ask the owner of that steel foundry you're trying to buy a Corvette from what he'd charge, and pointedly decline to see if that offer is market competitive? Answer. The Olympics is the excuse for massive amounts of government corruption. Ever notice how every Olympic stadium is built new rather than using existing structures? I know you're probably talking about Summer Olympics, not Winter Olympics, but at the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, we reused our existing stadiums and arenas. The speed skating oval was built new, but was repurposed and is an asset to the community. The curling facility turned into a massive rec center and swimming pool. Story 152, that the Congo is having a massive violation problem and no one discusses it. It's getting worse too, where the rise in violation with children is getting worse. Story 153, untreated ADHD can reduce lifespan by 13 years. The impact may be larger than any other single health threat, including weight, nutrition, exercise, sleep duration, smoking, adult beverage use, risky driving. Story 154, one of my friends from high school, 28F, recently got diagnosed with a major aggressive brain cancer. Expected 5-6 months left to live. Story 155, that the chances of survival if you go into cardiac arrest outside of hospital is incredibly low. I think it's something like 20, but maybe even lower. Even if someone is doing trained CPR. TV and movies have made us have this idea that you can just do a few chest compressions and the person wakes up. That very rarely happens. Usually you're just doing it long enough until a medical professional can come and take over, and then they still might not be able to do anything if they can get a shockable rhythm going. Story 156. Once you got a diabetes, you will never be normal healthy again. You need to manage your diet forever if you want to be in a relatively healthy condition. Story 157. Not all parents love their children. You might think everyone knows this, but they don't know it well enough to not say, "But she's your mom." Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.